midnight UTC. A meteorologist loads the latest satellite loops, goes over the Americas, Meteosat over Africa and Europe, Himawari over the Pacific, and gets black frames. No cloud tops, no lightning flashes, no water vapor swirls. At the same moment, a surveyor's rover on a highway embankment shows no GNSS and a container ship's bridge alarms, position lost. A script at a bank's data center throws its first warning of the night, GPS timing missing, switching to holdover. News wires don't notice yet. The sky just went quiet. Hour 1. Phones everywhere still work. Maps open and place you somewhere plausible because cell towers and Wi-Fi can guess location. But the blue dot jitters and the heading jumps. A hiker's breadcrumb trail looks like a drunk spider. On a rooftop in Madrid, an amateur astronomer checks a satellite tracker app for an ISS pass and sees a map that never updates. In a control room, a satellite TV operator watches transponders drop one by one until an entire constellation is mute. Cable channels that backhaul via geostationary links freeze. Some switch to studio feeds and apologize without saying why. Airliners in cruise are fine. Inertial nav and the flight management system fly the route. But the standby GPS position on many cockpit displays blinks amber. Pilots file a simple note, GNSS unreliable. Hour 2. Offshore, ships that rely on VSAT for email and weather lose the internet. The gyro compass still points north, the radar paints targets, the echo sounder works. Near coasts, terrestrial AIS transponders continue to chatter ship to ship on VHF. Beyond the horizon, satellite AIS goes dark. A tug captain in Singapore notices his electronic chart display and information system throw a position-lost banner and reaches for dead reckoning, course, speed, time. This is seamanship, not catastrophe. It is also slower. In the Arctic night, a research boy drifts under aurora and fails to call home. A grad student asleep in Oslo has no idea that a gap just opened in their time series. Hour 3. Financial systems start leaning harder on backup clocks. Trading venues and data centers discipline their oscillators with GPS and hold within nanoseconds. When that signal is gone, those oscillators coast. Good ones hold for hours, cheaper ones drift. Precision time. Protocol over fiber carries clean time where networks are built for it. Elsewhere, drift accumulates in digits, invisible to almost everyone, until logs disagree and a compliance script complains. A telecom operations center flips playbooks, tells cell towers to ride their local quartz and stop disciplining to a satellite they can't see, keep clusters in phase so handovers don't fail. Packet loss ticks up in remote base stations that backhaul through satellite. In dense cities, the internet shrugs. Hour 4. Emergency beacons stop hitting satellites. EPIRBs on boats, personal locator beacons in mountains, aircraft ELTs. Normally these ping the Cospas-Sarsat system, a mix of low Earth and geostationary satellites that hear distress calls and pass positions to rescue coordination centers within minutes. Without satellites, a beacon may still shriek, but nobody above the horizon hears. Marine Channel 16, VHF, HF and CEL fills some of the gap, but the magic of a satellite hearing you anywhere on Earth is gone. Search and rescue teams quietly update their risk models, more reliance on last-seen positions, more time before our helicopter launches with a confident fix. Hour 5. Meteorology begins to bleed. Numerical weather prediction models drink data, surface stations, radio sonde balloons, aircraft reports, and satellites. Without satellite radiances and cloud motion vectors, the models still run, but with far fewer eyes over oceans and deserts. Forecasters can still draw fronts from radar and station reports over land. Over the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, an unsettling blindness spreads. Convective storms that a geostationary imager would have flagged now grow unobserved until lightning networks or coastal radar catch them at the edge. Aviation watches that emptiness. Transoceanic dispatchers put more conservative separation into flight plans. Crews listen harder to HF static for voice relays. Hour 6. TV news cuts to an anchor who says a bland sentence about a technical issue affecting some satellite providers, while a crawl instructs viewers to retune. People in households with fiber or cable don't notice. People in rural towns with dishes on their roofs lose live channels and watch local recordings. A talk show guest grins and says aliens, then winks. The anchor does not laugh. Weather segments hold on last hour's radar and a presenter's pen, no timeless satellite swirl to point at. Nobody mentions that hurricane season without satellites is a different sport. Hour 7. Airports wake. Modern air traffic control does not use GPS to see airplanes. It uses primary radar, secondary surveillance radar, and multilateration. But ADS-B, Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast, depends on GPS to tell a transponder precisely where it is before it broadcasts that position to ground and other aircraft. With GNSS down, ADS-B out becomes less trustworthy. Many countries have mandated multilateration and radar as backups. Those nets handle the load. Performance-based navigation procedures, RNP approaches with tight curved paths a GPS-fed plane can fly with surgical precision, are suspended. Controllers clear more conventional instrument approaches, VOR, DME, ILS. Schedules stretch, delays grow, safety margins remain fat. Hour 8. In cities, ride-hail drivers chase phantom blue dots. Apps estimate locations by towers and Wi-Fi. Accuracy is good enough to pick up a rider, worse when traffic splits across ramps and frontage roads. Delivery vans creep, logistics dashboards drift. Bike couriers watch paper maps on their phones. Digital maps still load over fiber. People who know street grids surge. People who live by voice prompts curse. The world remembers that compasses point to magnetic north, not to an address. Hour 9. Precision agriculture hits a wall. Tractor autosteer that lays down seeds in centimeter-accurate lines rides on GNSS with real-time kinematic corrections broadcast over satellites or cell. Without the satellites, both the core constellations and the augmentation services, autosteer drops to dead reckoning or stops. Variable rate fertilizer plans that depend on exact position and soil maps pause. A farmer who planted straight lines yesterday with guidance now watches a light bar and a marker disc and does it the way their parent did. Work continues. Efficiency drops. Hour 10. Drones go unpredictable. Most consumer drones lean on GNSS for position hold and geofencing. With satellites gone, they can still hover using vision and IMUs, but drift with the wind and lose the invisible fences that kept them out of airports. Many models refuse to arm when they can't see enough satellites. Owners complain. That is exactly what you want. Professional survey drones that fly RTK grids stand down. Cinematography looks the same. Mapping does not. Hour 11. A space weather monitor at L1 sends its last good packet down a deep space antenna and then goes quiet. Without satellite eyes on the sun, we lose early warning on incoming solar storms, no real-time coronagraphs or X-ray flux. Ground magnetometers still feel the big hits when they arrive, and radio amateurs will be the first to tweet that the bands just died. But grid operators lose their favorite heads up, a ping that says, "A coronal mass ejection is inbound, ETA 36 hours, field orientation TBD." Defenses can still be raised when the magnetometers twitch, foreknowledge shrinks. Hour 12. Power grid operators double-check their phasor measurement units. PMUs compare the phase of voltages and currents across huge distances using GPS-locked timestamps. With those stamps gone, the sensors still measure, but their angles drift relative to one another. Situational awareness degrades. No rolling blackouts, no apocalypse. Operators simply stop relying on synchrophasor dashboards for precise wide-area control. They set more conservative limits and postpone delicate maneuvers. The lights stay on because engineers studied for this exam decades ago and wrote procedures. Hour 13. Airlines drop polar routes unless absolutely necessary. SATCOM for voice and data over the poles rides satellites. Without it, HF radio returns to its old scratchy throne. Flights between North America and Asia swing south into routes that keep them in VHF range longer. That burns fuel and costs time. Crew duty limits are adjusted. Passengers grumble and photograph auroras that creep farther south than usual in their own sky now that weather satellites aren't hogging the attention. Hour 14. Fisheries skippers in the Southern Ocean discover how much weather came from space. Without scatterometers that measure winds over the ocean from the ripples on a radar image, the maps they use daily get simpler and less trusted. Without altimeters that map sea surface height to reveal deep eddies that trap fish, intuition replaces a layer of math. Catch rates shift and then stabilize as crews fall back on experience. A few crews overshoot and spend fuel finding greener water. Hour 15. Urban myths deploy. Posts claim that without satellites, ATMs stop, phones die, and planes fall. In truth, ATMs talk over terrestrial networks and will work until a bank times them out. Phones cling to cell for now. Their maps are less precise. Texting keeps flowing. Planes are still boring machines guided by trained people who expect things to fail and train for it. The correction is less shareable than the rumor. Hour 16. Scientists hold emergency meetings. Ocean color researchers lament that phytoplankton maps are gone for the season. Wildfire mappers shift to aircraft and ground sensors. Climate teams watch a data series they have nursed for 20 years gap and build correction notes. GPS radio occultation, a technique that tastes the atmosphere by watching how GNSS signals bend through it, falls to zero. Weather modelers open spreadsheets that estimate forecast skill loss by data type and start planning to validate the hit with the next few weeks of verification scores. In offices around the world, people who love time series arc into the same posture, shoulders forward, hands on keyboards, voices tight. Hour 17. In hospital basements, engineers check the timing on networks that knit machines together. Most use local time and internal protocols. A few services, like some telemedicine links to rural clinics, backhaul by satellite and die immediately. Hospitals in cities blink and move on. Clinics on islands and in the Arctic call health ministries on HF radio and ask for ferry schedules for shipments they once ordered by VSAT. After decades of talk about redundancy, the word redundancy turns into vans and boats. Hour 18. Ground-based weather radars become celebrities again. Forecasters on TV point to sweeping arcs over cities and explain range folding to viewers who miss this class. Lightning detection networks that triangulate strikes from ground sensors fill some of the gap visually. The missing layer is the view over the horizon, the place where squall lines form far at sea and where tropical cyclones spin. Without microwave sounders peering through clouds to measure temperature and humidity profiles over the tropics, 5-day forecasts will be worse. Not doom, just fatter cones of uncertainty. Hour 90. The first big organizational pains show up in places nobody associates with space. Railroad dispatchers who installed positive train control systems that used GPS timing and positioning fall back on older modes. Nothing stops, fewer trains move per hour on some sections. Taxis in cities where medallions died and apps rule bunch oddly and take longer to arrive. Stadiums tell fans to bring paper tickets because scanner systems that rely on timing drift don't like mismatched clocks. Conferences feel like 2007. Students see lanyards again. Hour 20. Someone tries to bring up eLoran, terrestrial long-wave navigation reborn as a backup for timing and position, and discovers the transmitter in their country was dismantled 10 years ago. Another country lights theirs and starts broadcasting. Receivers are scarce. Procurement offices get emails. It takes months to build a backup you didn't fund, but the line items will appear next year because a week without satellites makes budget justifications build themselves. Hour 21. Amateur radio lights up like a festival. Local emergency nets practice passing messages the way they used to teach in the 1990s. Communities discover their operators again and their beige radios and go boxes. It's overkill and wonderful. In a city without any immediate harm, neighbors knock on doors with clipboards and check in on elderly residents because the news said something about satellites and nobody could remember what that actually meant. Hour 22. A rocket on a pad waits. Range safety, tracking and telemetry rely on a mix of ground radars, optical trackers and, yes, satellites. Launch schedules slip because insurance clauses and safety rules are written with assumptions about eyes in the sky. Space agencies huddle. How do you certify safe flight in a sky where no one will hear the downlink? The irony tastes metallic. Launches stand down until new ground campaigns are ready. Hour 23. Undersea cables carry almost all international internet traffic. They hum along, unaffected by missing satellites. A reporter in a studio says the internet is down because a satellite ISP sent a sad press release. Someone else writes the correction. The real pain is in the last mile in remote places, on ships, on planes, in disaster zones that relied on small dishes to leapfrog geography. The Earth's wired nervous system handles the core. The sky was the connective tissue at the edges. Hour 24. One day in, the novelty fades. The work begins. Rescuers miss their first Cospas-Sarsat hits and adjust. Airlines refile routes with more terrestrial navigation and more fuel. Their on-time percentages sag, their safety margins do not. Broadcasters switch to terrestrial backups where they exist. Rural dishes stay blank. Researchers rewrite grant reports to explain a hole that will look like negligence to someone who doesn't live in the data. The risk is clear. If a large solar storm hits while the magnetosphere is dented and our eyes are gone, the punch will surprise us nearer to the jaw. Day 2. Forecast skill drops. Without satellite radiances and GNSS RO baked into initial conditions, 5-day track forecasts for mid-latitude cyclones lose sharpness. Hurricane tracks, when season returns, swing wider cones. River flood warnings still work because rain radars and gauges are terrestrial. Flash floods in remote basins get less lead time. Fire weather misses some of the crackling alignments that satellites saw from orbit. Aviators miss winds aloft data derived from satellites and lean on pilot reports and radio sonde climbs. In cities, most people live a normal day under a sky that no longer tells them its story on a loop. Day 3. Military and intelligence services do the work they don't talk about in public. Retask aircraft over places satellites once watched, increase use of tethered aerostats, buy time on high-altitude pseudo-satellites. Their silence is not evidence of anything except a culture that expects tools to fail and plans to replace them. What leaks is not operations but procurement priorities. More aircraft hours, more balloons, more fiber to bases that leaned on space. Day 4. The finance industry rolls out the patches that were PowerPoints last quarter. Time from fiber, grandmaster clocks in more racks, audits for clock discipline across trading firms, backup rubidium oscillators for collocated servers. Compliance teams accept larger error bars in time-stamped records for a month with a paper trail. This is what hardening looks like. Money spent over a year because a week taught a lesson the easy way. Day 5. A flawed blog post goes viral arguing that satellites were a luxury all along because everything still works. A response that reaches fewer people points out who is missing from that everything. Island communities whose clinics lost telemedicine, mining operations in deserts that lost internet, scientific campaigns tracking polar ice and rainforest fires that folded, airlines that burned more fuel and cancelled marginal routes, farmers who planted less precisely and paid more for seed. Satellites are not the internet. They are the part of modern life that stretches modern life into places fiber doesn't reach. Day 6. Weather agencies publish their first verification statistics since the blackout. Skill scores show the hit. A few points shaved off 3-day forecasts, more shaved off 5-day and 7-day. Public forecasters were good and conservative. Watches and warnings stayed reliable. The public would not notice the difference if nobody told them. Professionals feel it viscerally. Cyclone tracks wobble more, frontal wave timing slips, jet streaks misplace. It's like losing a lens you didn't realize was helping. Day 7. Airline dispatchers settle into new foundations. Route packages calculate extra fuel for old-fashioned navaids. HF static is back in training scenarios, and crews, who learned on glass cockpits, remember why older pilots made them memorize VOR radials. An older craft that everyone thought was a quaint hobby turns again into the right answer. Celestial navigation classes fill up in ports where mates choose to learn because the sky still has stars and sextants still work without a login. Week 2. Engineers start designing away the worst fragilities. Telcos accelerate rolling out network-based timing. Power utilities buy more magnetometers and better transformer monitors to handle geomagnetically induced current without space weather alerts. Weather services fund more ground-based LiDARs and microwave radiometers to fill a sliver of the satellite gap over land. A handful of countries light eLoran transmitters for real. The void in the sky turns into line items in budgets. Week 3. Science consortia publish a plan to stitch the time series back together when satellites return. Cross-calibrate sensors, validate with aircraft underflights, accept that a notch in a record can be explained and adjusted for if everyone writes down exactly what they did. Laboratories that use satellites for time via GNSS adopt fiber. Atomic clock sales tick up because someone else's clock is now your own problem. Week 4. The general public stops caring because at ground level almost everything works. This is both the goal and the danger. Success in resilience makes the service invisible again. Advocacy groups push to remind people who doesn't bounce. People on boats far from land, on planes far from VHF, in clinics far from fiber, and in emergencies far from luck. The value of orbital eyes and ears is greatest far from cities. It is hard to hold attention there. Months. If the darkness persists, backup cultures solidify. Surveyors return to total stations and traverse more relative positions before they can set absolute ones. Pipeline and utility teams, which locate assets with GNSS receivers, send 2 techs instead of 1 and walk lines with older scanners. Insurance companies add riders for satellite outages to policies that cover aviation and shipping. Procurement cycles turn into installations. A layer of muscle and fat grows over old, weak ribs. There's a meta-lesson in the way the story unfolded. Satellites are mostly not about consumer convenience. They are about physics at scale, precise time raining down everywhere at once, weather observed over the 70% of Earth that is ocean, a distress call heard in the middle of nowhere, a ship no bigger than a pixel tracked across the planet by listening for VHF radio from orbit, a hurricane watched as it breathes, the ground studied day after day so change can be told from noise. Pull that thread and you do not get an apocalypse. You get a less efficient, less equal, less precise world. At the human level, the first week felt like this. A pilot looked down at a standby display and saw a GPS flag, shrugged, and flew the ILS. A controller added a mile between arrivals and drank coffee. A farmer stared at a light bar instead of a perfect green line and rounded a row. A rescuer called an RCC and got a sigh, and then a plan with more steps. A weather presenter pointed to a radar echo and wished they could show a view from space. A ship's mate bent over a chart and marked dead reckoning plots with a pencil. Nothing dramatic. Everything slightly harder. The miracle is how much modern life gives you for free until you notice it isn't free. There will be a temptation to propose never again. The answer is here already and boring. Build backups, diversify timing, keep skills alive, design systems that fail gracefully, fund the unsexy things like long-wave transmitters and magnetometers, pay for one more operator on the night shift. Don't fight physics, make it a friendly neighbor twice. When the satellites come back to life, don't forget the week you lived by other means. Keep the clocks and the skills you bought. If they don't come back, then the story is longer and still not a doom scroll. You can rebuild eyes in the sky, you can fly instruments, you can loft balloons, you can rewind to methods that still work at the speed of light without orbits. The 20th century did weather and navigation with less. The 21st can do it better with resilience as a feature, not an afterthought. Night falls again on the second week. In the absence of orbital meteorology, auroras own social feeds. People look up for the first time in years. Someone in a city who always thought the satellite loop was a screensaver notices clouds move and learns west from east by watching them cross the moon. A child in a farmhouse alongside a field without autosteer rides a tractor and sees how straight a human can drive when the stakes are rows of corn. A mariner marks a noon sight and gets a line of position within a mile and grins in a way you can't fake. Somewhere, a server room hums with OKEXOs and PTP and a line on a dashboard that says locked to fiber now, not to the sky. Civilization shows its trick. It didn't forget how to be clever when one tool broke. If all satellites went dark tonight, the story would be inconvenient, not cinematic. It would be written in fuel bills and delayed connections, wider storm cones and slower rescues, the quiet absence of maps over oceans and the sudden presence of skill. It would end with a checklist and a budget and an ethic that says, next time we'll keep the stars and the wires.